Northumbria University graduate Alice Ruggles was subjected to a campaign of harassment and stalking by former soldier Tremaine Dillon after their brief but intense relationship came to an end. To the outside world, the Lance Corporal, who went by the name Harry, was a hero who served in Afghanistan and wore his 2 Scots uniform with pride. But behind the respectable military facade, he lacked discipline when it came to women, and that would be his downfall. After the end of their brief relationship, Tremaine tormented Alice with abusive calls, messages, and emails, and even hacked into her social media account at some point. Alice got so terrified that she reached out to the police for advice, but the force didn't do enough to protect her. 5 days after her last call to the police, her horrified flatmate found her laying lifeless in the bathroom. Apparently, she was attacked with a sharp object by the man the police later called calculated and callous. The death of Alice Ruggles drew widespread attention, with many calling on the police for failing to record Dillon's behaviour as stalking. Born to Sue and Clive Ruggles on December 24, 1991, Alice's friends and family will always remember her for her outgoing and happy personality. She had the unique ability to cheer anyone up when they were down. She was a brilliant listener, genuinely empathetic, and incredibly quick-witted. She was mischievous, funny, and loved socialising, which was the reason she made friends quite easily. Alice was the third of the 4 Ruggles children and grew up with her siblings in the quiet Leicestershire village of Tir Langton.
She always had a smile on her face. And as she grew up, she was very sensitive to how other people felt. So she would notice if you were unhappy, and she'd always come out with some little story or some little joke that would have you rolling on the floor. And she was very good like that.
Alice is from a close-knit family, and she always managed to make her presence known, whether through the endless banter on the family WhatsApp group, mischievous pranks, or her jokes. She was a born entertainer who could be found singing in school concerts and leading karaoke at friends' parties at a young age. For her senior years at school, she attended Leicester High School for Girls, where her mother, Sue, worked. Alice soon became popular and successful there, performing comic pieces, in-house events, singing in the chamber choir, and playing a lead role in the school pantomime. The Ruggles family Christmas was a 3-day affair. No one ever missed one, even after the children had moved away from home and everyone was scattered around the country. At Alice's insistence, the serious eating would always kick off with an enormous Chinese meal on her birthday, Christmas Eve. Alice discovered fencing at a PGL camp at the age of 11, and the sport quickly became a big part of her life. Her chosen weapon was the épée, and Alice represented her home county of Leicestershire and the East Midlands region numerous times. Alice also enjoyed remarkable success on the national fencing circuit. By the time she was 18, Alice decided to select potential universities based on the strengths of their fencing clubs, and she duly chose Northumbria, where she became club captain. Alice's biggest achievement in the sport was winning the women's épée at the Leeds Open in 2012. Alice fell in love with the city of Newcastle and carried on living there after she graduated. Within a short while, she secured a job at media giant Sky's Newcastle hub, and it wasn't long before her hard-working attitude paid off, and she was promoted to site coordinator and PA to the head of sales.
After she finished her degree, she got a job working for Sky. That job suited her so much, it just gave, it utilised all the skills that she had.
But with the promotion came more workload, and Alice soon became worn out and needed a break. So she and her friend headed to Indonesia to have a nice time, and her friend posted some pictures on Facebook. In no time, a friend of a friend saw the pictures and reached out to Alice's friend, who would later connect the duo. And that was how Alice and Tremaine got talking. Tremaine, known to everyone as Harry, was a Lance Corporal in the British Army, stationed at Glencorse Barracks in Edinburgh, Scotland, and was training to join the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. At the time Dillon and Alice connected, he was serving in Afghanistan, and the pair started talking over Facebook. In January 2016, the couple met in person for the first time and began a serious relationship which was beginning to go really smoothly. Dylan was attentive, caring and considerate, and friends said Alice was really into him. Dylan and Alice spent a couple of weeks together in Newcastle and then in Edinburgh before he returned to Afghanistan for his final 2-month tour of duty. Dylan returned to the UK in April. Within 3 months, Alice invited him to the family's annual holiday, where she formally introduced him to the entire family, and the pair were inseparable. Alice's siblings noticed she was really happy with the relationship and felt she had seen the one. But things took a turn as cracks began to appear in the couple's short relationship. Alice's close associates began to notice some concerning changes in her. From the outgoing, vibrant and happy person that loved any chance to socialise, Alice was becoming withdrawn, distant, miserable and lonely. Her work was also adversely affected. Her boyfriend was becoming increasingly critical of her in every way, so much so that it drove Alice further into an isolated state. Her family even noticed how unhappy and withdrawn she was during a family holiday to a cottage in Cornwall sometime in July. But her boyfriend would later describe it as perfect. Dylan became so controlling that he determined what she wore, where she went, and the people she communicated with. At some point, he took control of her Facebook account and changed the password. Pissed at his action, Ruggles decided to take down the account and register a new one. Alice began losing weight and falling out with her friends she was once close to. After a fallout with her housemates, she moved into a new ground-floor flat in Gateshead, where she lived with one of her work friends, Maxine. But aside from trying to control her life, Dylan was also seeing other women. Alice soon confirmed her suspicion that Dylan was up to no good when a woman contacted her saying she had been seeing Dylan at the same time she was. At this, Alice decided she had had enough because she couldn't trust him anymore. In fact, all the while he had been demanding her loyalty to him, Dylan had been cheating on her, contacting random women and engaging in casual sex with them. So she ended the relationship for good, but Dylan wasn't prepared to let her go. In the ensuing weeks, he bombarded her with calls, voice messages, texts, and emails. And the content of the messages depended on his mood at the time of sending them. Some of the messages were apologetic, with Dylan begging for another chance, while others were plain aggressive. He also contacted Alice's friends and family. In one message, he stated he was not used to being denied what rightfully belonged to him. During August and September, Alice Ruggles received a torrent of messages from Harry Dylan, emails, texts, and voicemails from several different phones. In some, the then 26-year-old professed his undying love for her. In others, he used emotional blackmail, threatening to kill himself or crying on the phone. In yet others, Harry was more menacing, threatening her that he'd release some compromising photographs he had secretly taken of her. In short, Harry Dylan had become obsessed with Alice. When she simply ignored his messages, he started contacting her family and friends, even texting Sue, referring to her as Mum and begging her to convince Alice to take him back. But when he saw that he was heading nowhere, he would contact Sue just to tell her how horrible her daughter was. Alice initially tried to be kind and sympathetic, feeling bad that he was so devastated by the end of the relationship. But she soon was left with no choice but to cut him off, as he just wouldn't stop calling and sending messages. At the beginning of September, Dylan gained access to Alice's Facebook account, and it became apparent that he was seeing all her messages so that he knew where she was and who she was speaking to. Harry would later find out that Alice had started a new relationship with a military officer called Mike, and he was furious. In a bid to destroy the relationship, he contacted Mike directly and told him that Alice was still in a relationship with him at the same time. On September 30th, Harry drove to Alice's flat and repeatedly rang the doorbell, only to hide when she looked through the spy hole to see who was there. Alice knew that her ex-boyfriend had been fooling around again and did not answer the door. A few hours later, he climbed the fence into the back garden and knocked on her ground floor window as she was in her bedroom. When Alice opened the curtains, she saw chocolates and flowers on the windowsill, with Dylan slowly backing off. As he drove back to Edinburgh, he left a chilling phone message where he kept reiterating that he wasn't out to kill her and would never do that. Some of it read, "I only wanted to give you chocolates and flowers to prove that I have no intentions of killing you. Why would you think I'd kill you? I'm not going to kill you." From his voicemail, it was obvious Dylan had something up his sleeves. Why would someone possibly say he had no intention to kill if he didn't have sinister motives? He mentioned the word kill several times, which in itself is a threat. He would later send another message saying she could bin the gifts if she wanted, but he was sorry. The situation wasn't getting any better, and Alice knew she needed help, so she contacted 101, a non-emergency police number, for advice.
Hi there, I just need a bit of advice really, more than anything. I split up with my boyfriend about 3 months ago. Since then, I know that he's hacked into my Facebook and also my phone. He's been sending me a lot of messages even though I've asked him not to contact me. And then tonight, he knocked on my bedroom window at the back of my ground floor flat. He's been outside and he's left some flowers and chocolates on the outside windowsill and he walked off. He's not done anything, but I'm concerned, and my friends have been telling me to call the police. I've been putting it off, but I just feel a bit shaken up tonight.
The police were very sympathetic and assured her that she had nothing to fear. Dylan could be stopped. They tagged the incident as harassment and immediately issued a police information notice, PIN. A PIN is issued as a caution in the event of an allegation of harassment. Its main purpose is to notify the alleged harasser that the behaviour amounts to harassment and is unacceptable. But it is not a court order and signing. It does not admit to any wrongdoing on the perpetrator's part. On the 3rd of October, this notice was communicated to Dylan in his Edinburgh barracks, but he ignored it and continued to contact Alice. This time, he sent a parcel containing a letter and a couple of other items. In the letter, Tremont said he was aware she had gone to the police, which had put him in a lot of trouble, which was a lie. He ended the letter by wishing her a happy life and vowing never to contact her again. But Alice knew her ex-boyfriend better, so she reached out to the police again.
Somebody's been issued with a pen so that they can't contact me. However, I've had a letter off them.
So you're reporting the breach of the pen. What was the nature of it? Was it threatening or was it harassing?
No, not threatening. It's just saying that he knows I called the police on him and he's had everything confiscated. It says at the bottom he won't contact me. This will be the last I hear from him. But he's said that a lot of times and he never does seem to stop.
This time round, the response was less sympathetic, and the police didn't take any action. Alice became so depressed that she now believed nothing would or could be done to stop this stalking. She reached out to her family and jokingly told her brother Nick that what if Dylan broke into her house and killed her? Nick laughed it off, saying it was ridiculous and would never happen. On the 10th of October, Dylan drove down to her flat again that evening, climbed into the back garden and took a photo of the back window and the bathroom before heading back to Edinburgh. At this time, she was already living in a state of fear, constantly looking over her shoulder. Her colleagues were aware of what she was going through, and one even offered to drive her home each day and wait till she walked to her front door. Once inside, she would immediately double-lock it. Wednesday the 12th of October was like every other day, and Alice had a great day at work. Her colleague dropped her at her door as usual at 5:30 p.m. Alice messaged her friend, showing off a dress she had bought, and texted her lover Mike. But the messages soon stopped, and just before 6:30 p.m, Alice's flatmate returned home. With the front door locked, Maxine got in through the window and saw Alice lying in the bathroom.
Right, Alice. Please, I've just come back to my flat and the door was locked, so I crawled through the window and my flatmate's covered in blood in the bathroom.
Can you have a look and see if she's breathing for the ambulance?
She's not.
She's not breathing.
She's not breathing, she's actually blue, please. Oh.
It's okay.
Please help her. I don't know what to do.
She called out her name repeatedly, but Alice was unresponsive.
Oh my God, she's dead.
It's okay.
Please help her. I don't know what to do. The police are here.
The police officer's there.
Yeah.
Okay. close your phone down for me, Maxine?
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Apparently, Tremont Dillon, Alice's jealous ex-boyfriend, had taken her life, causing injuries to her throat with a sharp object. Alice Ruggles was pronounced dead at 7:30 p.m, and she had suffered 24 injuries in total. The coroner concluded that Alice had died from catastrophic blood loss. Although Maxine was still visibly shaken, she identified Dillon as a suspect while saying they saw it coming. The police found this useful and immediately ran his car number plate through the automated recognition system. His car was picked up journeying from Edinburgh down to Newcastle earlier that day. The police were certain Dillon was the culprit and arrested him in his barracks before midnight on suspicion of murder. At 3:24 a.m, Dillon arrived at Gateshead Police Station for questioning. He admitted he had travelled to Newcastle that day, but said it was because he needed closure and answers about why Alice never wanted to speak to him again. When asked why he had breached the PIN, Dillon couldn't give a specific answer. He kept revolving around seeking closure. He even denied entering her flat, claiming that Ruggles was the one that came out and attacked him. He told police that Alice confessed her fears about men killing their girlfriends, and she was scared that he would do the same to her. As if that wasn't enough for the lies, he said he reached out to hold her hands, and she responded by scratching him across the face. Dillon said after the incident he felt disappointed and drove away, but then he was hit with a tougher question. The police asked him why he'd abandoned Alice, despite seeing her in a pool of her own blood, after claiming she injured herself in a scuffle. Dillon again put up another story. He said seeing Alice covered in blood gave him a flashback to a helicopter crash in which 5 colleagues died, including one who had his throat cut by his visor. In fact, he had not seen the casualties and only visited the site of the accident to guard it 2 days later, he claimed. Dillon seemed up to whatever question the police threw at him and showed no remorse, as he was more interested in getting his story right. Tremont Harry Dillon was the only child of his parents and was born in India. His dad was also in the army and he moved around with him. Tremont started a degree in his home country and then was given the option to do the final 2 years at Queen Margaret University near Edinburgh and moved to the UK in 2010. Shortly afterward, the army came to the university to recruit, and Dillon passed the selection process and passed out in May 2 years later. The Indian-born spent time at Sandhurst Academy and had also worked for the Royal Guard, protecting the royal family on visits to Scotland. Tremont was an obsessive control freak. To the outside world, he was a hero, but behind the respectable military facade, he lacked discipline and self-control when it came to women. He had a history of reacting badly to being dumped long before he even met Alice Ruggles. His first relationship was with a lady named Aniko Nemeth in 2012, and it ended pretty badly. Nemeth ended the relationship, but Dillon wouldn't take no for an answer and kept stalking her. Once, he tracked her down and spat in her face in the streets while hurling abuse at her and her new boyfriend, saying she ruined his life. Pissed at his actions, she immediately got a restraining order against him, and he was charged with common assault. The case would later be dropped after Dillon accepted the restraining order. Less than 3 years after the incident, Dillon saw a picture of Alice on Facebook, and the fatal attraction began after they made contact through a mutual friend. Even though Dillon was away in Afghanistan with the army then, the relationship quickly blossomed, from October the 11th, a year and a day before he took her life. But despite his possessive and controlling behaviour towards Alice, Tremont was serially unfaithful to her. He was regularly in touch with random girls on dating websites, including Plenty of Fish and Tinder, and even arranged casual hookups. Meanwhile, as Alice's family mourned their daughter, the police received a huge backlash for the way the case was handled. This forced the Northumbria Police to conduct an internal review. The review produced a report which identified potential misconduct by officers and was referred to the Independent Office of Police Conduct. 2 police officers then faced disciplinary action over handling of the case. Northumbria Police revealed that they did refer their actions to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. They said no one at the time knew the threat that Dillon posed. The force has since apologised after the Independent Police Complaints Commission ruled that the officers failed to properly investigate Alice's claims. Gateshead Community Safety Board also carried out a domestic homicide review. The review concluded that Alice had been subjected to significant stalking and agreed upon a series of 20 recommendations to help prevent similar incidents from happening again. Her parents, Sue and Clive, said, "We believe that her death was preventable. We find it difficult to comprehend that although Alice described in her first phone call to the police that she was being stalked and provided ample evidence, the police and the army were unable to support and protect her." Her colleague, who always dropped her at her door, wrote of her, "You know I'm a man of few words, unless it was badgering you to get my laptop ordered, so I just wanted to list my best memories of you. Genuinely, the most horrific Mancunian accent I have ever heard. Absolutely awful, and hilarious in equal measure. You taught me the difference between foil, epee, and sabre. I still won't watch it at the Olympics. You are more sarcastic than me. Your sense of humour was second to none, so witty and sharp as a tack. Last, but definitely not least, you had the most infectious personality and brightened the office on a daily basis. I can genuinely say any day I spoke to you was a happier one for it. You never failed to make me laugh, and I'm a miserable sod. Thanks, Alice." After the investigation, body language expert Dr. Cliff Lansley revealed that Dylan gave 4 telltale signs that show he was hiding the truth. Early on in the police interview, Dylan was asked if he was responsible for Alice's death. Dr. Cliff explains that he had a little contraction of his buccinator muscle on his left cheek, where his left cheek and the left lip rose slightly. "It's a very tiny micro-expression of contempt," Cliff said. "Context is everything. We've got a female officer, so is he contemptuous towards women? Or is he contemptuous and confronted by the question, 'Did you murder Alice?' He avoided a contraction." According to the body language expert, contraction is a way of describing the do not combination. So, if Dylan was telling the truth, then often it will be contracted to, "I did not kill her." Dr. Lansley said Tremont also shook his head to reinforce his answer, which continued even after he stopped speaking. "He does a headshake, no, that reinforces the did not," he continued. If the headshake gesture continues when the words are finished, the person is in convincing mode. The fourth indicator that tells us it's a lie is eye closure. If we look closely, the eyes close for about a third of a second. Now, this is not a blink. His eyes are closed while he's shaking his head, meaning he's distancing himself from the statement. While concluding, he said, "We know of 4 indicators that when you put them together, tell us that his denial here is a confession." However, Dylan's trial began in April 2017 at Newcastle Crown Court, and he still pleaded not guilty to murder. But the court heard how he committed the heinous crime and the overwhelming evidence against him. Apparently, on the 12th of October 2016, Tremont drove from his barracks in Edinburgh to Alice's house in Gateshead and waited for her to return from work. Alice closed from work and had her colleague drop her off at home, unaware that her stalker was waiting for her and making sure that she was alone. While waiting, Dylan started messaging a girl on Tinder, making plans to meet up later that night to have casual sex. He had stalked Alice enough to know when she returned from work, when she hung out with her new boyfriend Mike, and when her roommate got home, so he knew the best time to get into the apartment was 6 p.m, and he did. Dylan climbed over the back wall and forced his way in through the window. He quietly took a sharp object from the kitchen and cornered Alice in the bathroom. He knelt on her back to pin her down and inflicted injuries to her throat before leaving her to bleed out. After committing the gruesome crime, he immediately returned to his barrack at Edinburgh. Within 30 minutes, the police got a call from Maxine, who had discovered her body lying in the bathroom in a pool of blood. While Dylan was in custody, police discovered Alice's blood on his steering wheel and his Help for Heroes wristband. Analysis of her phone records placed the phone en route to Edinburgh too. Coupled with the CCTV footage, Dylan was charged with the murder of Alice Ruggles a few hours after his arrest. With the overwhelming amount of evidence, Dylan and his defence team had no choice but to change his story.
Always expected that perhaps at the very last minute Tremaine Dillon would plead guilty to murder. It seemed he had no choice but to do so.
This time, he claimed that he had no intention of killing Alice and only showed up at her flat with the intention of getting his belongings. Shortly afterward, a violent argument ensued and she charged at him. Dylan said all this while he was on the defensive as he tried to push her away, but she rushed into the kitchen, armed herself with a sharp object, and tried to hurt him. In the process, she inflicted the injuries upon herself. He then said that as Alice lay dying, she spoke of how much she despised her family. He was later asked what was going through his mind as he looked down at the lady he claimed to love, breathing her last, and he responded by saying he felt terrible for her father, Clive, as he had been unable to protect his daughter in her last moments. While giving his side of the story, which apparently was his second story, Dylan showed no emotion as he seemed to have been focused on convincing the jury, but his story just didn't add up.
The thing that really came as a shock to all of us, I think, was just how manipulating he was still trying to be in court.
He was totally cruel and callous for the whole time. He has absolutely no remorse for what he did.
According to medical reports, Alice suffered multiple injuries that she obviously couldn't have inflicted on herself. From the state her body was found, both by Maxine and the police, there had been a scuffle and Alice fought for her life, but she was no match for Dylan, who was a trained soldier. And even if she was armed, as Dylan claimed, she still wouldn't have been a match for him. He was 6'1" and powerfully built. After an 11-day trial and just 2 hours of deliberations, Tremaine Harry Dillon was found guilty of the murder of Alice Ruggles and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. During his sentencing, Judge Paul Sloan described the murder as an act of utter barbarism and said, "Not a shred of remorse have you shown from first to last. Indeed, you were only concentrating so hard on getting your story right when giving evidence, you forgot to even shed a crocodile tear." The murder was aggravated by the way Tremaine had made Ruggles, described as normally a ray of sunshine and fun-loving, miserable over the last weeks of her life. Judge Sloan said to him, "You were stalking her, you were harassing her, you were destroying her."
Alice has left a massive Alice-shaped hole in my heart. My world will be completely different after Alice. How I discovered Alice. Does I struggle to remember her when she was alive? Because of what I see. And I'll never, ever get that out of my head. It's that image of Alice lying there.
Outside court, Alice's mum read a statement on behalf of the family. She said although justice had been served, none of her family, nor any of Alice's friends and colleagues, would ever be the same again. Alice was a kind, incredibly sociable, fun-loving person. She had the ability to light up the room whenever she walked in. We miss her so much. We believe there are important lessons to be learned from what happened to Alice. We welcomed him into our family, and he came across as a normal person. Unfortunately, he was a cruel, manipulative bully who made Alice miserable and took her away from us. With hindsight, there were many signs of stalking and coercive behaviour that we did not recognise. Everybody should know about these signs. Clive and Sue launched the Alice Ruggles Trust Relationship Safety Resource, which is teaching materials and lesson plans that focus on stalking and coercive control. These are freely available to secondary school teachers throughout the UK. In 2020, stalking protection orders were announced by the government, meaning the suspected stalkers could be given court orders blocking them from contacting or approaching their alleged victims, while the police investigate the claims thoroughly. Alice's mum also said she felt she had failed her daughter by teaching her to see the good in everyone, and also by not standing up to Tremaine herself after he contacted the mother on Facebook. "This feeling of failure will stick with me forever," she said, adding she may never forgive herself for advising her daughter that if she ignored him, he would eventually stop contacting her. Alice's affectionate and spirited personality continues to live on through those that knew her, and her family and friends have vowed that Alice's name will never be forgotten and her voice will continue to be heard.
You're thinking about that person every day and where they might be now, and now they might be joining in with what you're doing or whatever, and you never forget.
Please visit our online video course that will teach you everything you need to know about self-defense. 50% of all sales will be donated to a women's charity that combats domestic violence. Link to the program is in the description below.